A small town in southern Ukraine that has become a symbol of Russian military ineffectiveness might finally get flipped over to the Russian side. Just why is Russia so committed to taking the town of Volodar, and are the Ukrainians really planning on holding it at all costs? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about it. Okay, so this is a report that Russian forces are closing in on what has been described as the fortress city of Volodar. Ukraine has been mounting a 3-year-long defense of the city in the Donetsk region. But it appears that Russian forces have nearly encircled the town. Now, Volodar, calling it a city is generous. It had a pre-war population of about 14,000 people, which makes it really tiny, maybe a village by most standards. But the city is very difficult, has proven almost impossible for the Russians to take. It sits on high ground. It has some high-rise buildings, or at least it used to. There's not that much left. But Russian forces may have finally been able to make some meaningful advances, right? The Ukrainian 72nd Mechanized Brigade, which has basically been the anchor of Volodar for 2 straight years, is exhausted. Even its own commanders are acknowledging that. The Ukrainian forces there have had 0 rotations in 2 years, meaning that they have simply been holding these positions nonstop. But it seems like, again, the Ukrainians are not willing to allocate their limited reinforcements to stabilize this kind of situation. Now, why are the Russians so fixated on this? Well, before we talk about that, I wanted to make 2 acknowledgments. The first is that if you haven't subscribed to the channel, you should. But second, if you feel like you are getting encircled on all sides, you may need the energy to tackle whatever's in front of you, whether that's working out, doing better at your job, or just getting things done during the day, working through that checklist. You may need some more caffeine. Check out Strike Gum. Strike Gum. It's inspired by my time in Afghanistan when, if I wanted caffeine on a long combat patrol, I had to crack out a military issue energy drink. And if you haven't done that in the warm 110-degree desert, it's an awful experience. And I knew there had to be something better. So I created Strike Gum. We have all the caffeine of an energy drink, 90 milligrams in each piece. No sugar, 100 milligrams alpha GPC. Best of all, if you want to, go to strikegum.com, get free shipping when you subscribe, and you already get a discount by subscribing. If you're someone who knows you're ready to leave energy drinks behind, it's a no-brainer. But check us out. And check out the hundreds of reviews of Strike Gum, right? 5-star reviews, hundreds of them, 4.9 stars on Amazon. It's a no-brainer. So go to strikegum.com or check the link in the description. All right, let's talk about Volodar, okay? First, the Ukrainians 72nd Brigade is saying that we have not yet withdrawn from Volodar. And you can see, this is as of last year, Volodar continues to have some buildings standing, right? They have a number of these sort of Soviet-era apartment buildings that provide just an incredible view of the surrounding terrain. And this has been part of Russia's problem in Volodar, is that when you zoom in, you can see here's these large city that sits on elevated terrain, and that there is open terrain all the way to this town of Pavlivka. The only way, though, to cross this river here in Pavlivka is through this one road. And what that means is that the Ukrainians always see the Russians coming, and the Russians have no choice but to cross through one of really 2 roadways. What the Ukrainians would do then is deploy mines in these roadways. And as the Russians try to advance, they either hit the mines or are forced onto the roadways in a limited cleared path. In that limited cleared path, Ukrainian defenders would launch FPV drones, anti-tank missile systems, and would just absolutely piece apart these attacks. Oftentimes, they would make it to the outskirts of Volodar, where Ukrainian infantry would clean up whoever is left. The fighting in Volodar became embarrassing for the Russian military, because when you literally look it up, the Ukrainian military reported that the Russian 155th Naval Infantry Brigade was completely destroyed in February 2023 during the Battle of Volodar, right? So 1 year after the invasion. Ukrainian military said the Russians lost about 130 different armored pieces and were losing around 200 Russian Marines a day. The Ukrainian MOD concluded that the 155th had actually been reduced to nothing by April again, right? Meaning that they expended all of their troops and needed a complete refit. It actually said twice in the last 6 months. So they were zeroed out in February and then zeroed out again in April, right? In fact, they argue the UK Ministry of Defense Intelligence says the 155th Naval Brigade is being reconstituted several times over the course of this fight. And taking Volodar has become one of those things. It was seen for a long time as a symbol of the Russian military's ineffectiveness, right? In 2023, that was when you had the Wagner Group was making real gains in Bakhmut, and the Russia sent its elite naval infantry to take Volodar to prove that they were still effective. But instead, it became embarrassing as more and more mill bloggers would describe the sort of pointless assaults by these naval infantry units who were simply unable to break the Ukrainian defense of Volodar. However, it seems like the Russians, thanks to just huge reforms in how they fight and simply a willingness to take tiny, tiny pieces of terrain instead of sweeping encirclements, and the Ukrainians simply running out of people, and the Ukrainian policy of not holding any specific town, right? There is no piece of terrain that is so valuable that Ukraine is not willing to lose it or willing to lose battalions or brigades to defend it. No such piece of terrain exists. So the Ukrainians, it seems, are increasingly saying, listen, Volodar is at the end of the day just another town. They're like, oh, it's the hub of Donetsk. It's not. It's the hub of Volodar, right? Volodar is essential for defending Volodar. If they moved back to Bohyalinivka, you can see it's a town of roughly the same size, similar terrain features where the Russians would have to cross a ton of open ground to get there, right? And they would incur a bunch of casualties in the process of doing that. So the takeaway is that there's nothing intrinsically super valuable about this Volodar. And so it seems like the Russians are going to seize it, right? The Ukrainians likely going to withdraw under fire simply in order to prevent their forces from being encircled. So does it really mean anything? No, I don't think so. And I really don't put a lot of stock in this beyond the fact that, again, it's a symbolic victory, but it reflects, I think it says more about Ukraine's shifting priorities and its unwillingness to fight another Bakhmut, right? Bakhmut, Ukraine lost a lot of their best combat troops because it became a symbol of Ukrainian resistance. But the problem is, you can't win wars symbolically. You have to win wars on the battlefield. And so Ukraine has said, listen, no more losing real troops for symbolic victories, right? And that is why you've seen them not choose to reinforce the 72nd or rotate them out. That's why you see instead those fresh combat troops getting deployed into places like Kursk, where they can really start to achieve Ukrainian strategic objectives. Anyway, guys, that's really all I had. Huge thank you to the Colonel tier members of Combat Vet News, like Martin Baum, Chris Rossi, Stuart Abel, Daniel Prown, Sergei Zinchenko, Chris Holmes, Chris Gorsuch, Daniel M., and Ida Skycall, as well as all of our Lieutenant tier members. I could not do this without you guys. I appreciate you so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.